Hey, good morning. It's Mark here with another morning rant. Time on deck. I've been up for like an hour. Let's get into some news, shall we? MSNBC's Rachel Maddow reported that John Eastman, he's a Trump lawyer that wrote the quote-unquote John Eastman Memo that outlined the steps in which the vice president can overturn the January 6th electoral count vote on January 6th. There's a process that he spoke about in his memo. It's a two-page memo that they went out and made a six-page memo describing more in detail how Mike Pence can overturn the election. Mike Pence didn't know what to do. He was concerned. He wanted to please Trump. He didn't want to go by the law. He didn't want to go by his moral conviction. He didn't want to go by the Constitution. He wanted to please Donald Trump. So he called Dan Quayle, a former vice president under George H.W. Bush. And Dan Quayle had to tell him, you have no dog in the fight. It's over. You have no legal way of overturning this election. Your job is ceremonial. The states have already told now, the way it works is, and this is a Reader's Digest version of it, the way it works is the states, there are 50 plus one different ways that we elect a president. The states are in charge, the states plus the District of Columbia. They are in charge of their own elections. The state legislatures, per the Constitution, makes up their rules for electing a president. You don't want the federal government in charge. You really don't want the federal government in charge of deciding who the next president will be. Because if, let's just say, George W. Bush, let's say he wanted John McCain, let's say he wanted John McCain to beat Barack Obama in 2008. Who knows what the federal government could have done to sabotage that election? Let's say Barack Obama wanted Hillary Clinton to beat Donald Trump in 2016. Who knows what the federal government could have done to manipulate that to sway the election? Who's to say that Nixon in his Watergate scandal couldn't have done something to win the election? You know what I'm saying? So you don't want the federal government in charge of its own elections. You really don't. Now you want them to come up with you want the government to come up with a base of how it's done, a legal way of doing it, but then have the states fix it. So like in the Marine Corps, they tell us that Marine Corps doctrine is Marines will physically train 5 hours a week. So we know that we have PT, a physical training, 5 hours a week. The units will come down and say Marines will train 1 hour Monday through Friday. So they might, even though they're still within the frames of the doctrine, they spread it out. So we can do all the training. We can do 5 hours of training on Wednesday, or we can do an hour and a half training on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. However, I mean, that's probably going to go up to 5 hours, but you can spread it out. You know what I'm saying? So the government comes up with doctrine, and then the states can modify that within the framework of it. So the federal government, because the federal government is biased, and you want to, well, not biased, they're unbiased, they're nonpartisan, they're supposed to be nonpartisan. They just say, hey, here's the law that's equal for everybody. And then the states, who are supposed to be the same way, but they're supposed to be a direct reflection of the people, but it gets kind of convoluted. So anyway, he wrote this memo, and I got a lot of stuff going on over here, so just bear with me, people. He wrote this memo, and he's going against the Electoral Count Act of 1887. But he wrote this memo on how a six-step thing on how Mike Pence can overturn the election. Right? And after the coup, after the attempted insurrection, after that failed, he came out with a statement. I'll get to this video in a minute. He came out with a statement. Here it is, on where he says that his own report that he wrote for the president, he says, here we go right here. He says it was not viable and would be crazy to pursue. He said that his own memo would be not viable and crazy to pursue. Rachel Maddow did a report on this, and here's a caption in the video. Here he is bragging about that same memo.
I read your memo and I thought it was solid in all of its legal arguments.
Yeah.
And I was floored that Mike Pence didn't do anything. I mean, why didn't he act on it? Because you gave him the legal reasoning to do that.
I know. Now in a piece in the Atlantic 2 days ago, they're already anticipating Trump winning in 2024, and they're using my arguments from that memo that they all said had no credibility to argue that Kamala Harris can block Trump's electoral votes. I mean, it's like, I mean, come on, people, you can't.
So basically everyone's going to say, you're being proven right.
Yeah, exactly, except they're not saying that, right?
But that's what they mean.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
All of your legal reasoning is totally solid.
Yeah, there's no question, but...
But I mean, just supporter to supporter, why do you think that Mike Pence didn't do it?
Well, because Mike Pence is an establishment guy at the end of the day. And all of the establishment Republicans in D.C. bought into this very myopic view that Trump was destroying the Republican Party. And what Trump was doing is destroying the inside the Beltway Republican Party and reviving the Republican Party in the hinterland, right? What they...
Yeah. So, okay. So you got this guy going against his own report, saying that his memo was not viable. Let's get into the memo for a second. This is what he says they should do. All right. Step one. Step one. VP, I was going to say Mike Pence. VP Pence presiding over the joint session, or Senate Pro Temp Grassley if Pence recuses himself. Because no one knew if Mike Pence was going to recuse himself from this or not. And again, if the line of succession goes this: the president, the vice president, the speaker of the House, the president pro temp. The president pro temp is like the senior member of the Senate. And right now, the senior member of the Senate is a Republican, Chuck Grassley. So he's the fourth person in line, or the third person in line of succession. President, vice president, speaker of the House, president pro temp. Or Senate President pro temp Grassley, if Pence recuses himself, begins to open and count the ballot, starting with Alabama, without conceding that the procedure specified in the Electoral Count Act of going through the states alphabetically is required. So what that is, the Constitution says that, or the Electoral Count Act of 1887 specifies that at 1 o'clock on January 6th, this is supposed to happen. They open up a session of a joint session of Congress, and they start going off, one by one. Now, when he's talking about Alabama, is they go in alphabetical order. He said, without conceding that procedure, the Electoral Count Act says you will go. Now, if you want to argue that, you can go straight to the disputed states. But if you want to concede that and just go alphabetically, you can. It's nothing. When he gets to Arizona, he announces that he has multiple slates of electors and is going to defer decision on that until finishing the other states. This would be the first break of the procedures set out in the act. So again, he's defined the act, which he says earlier in this memo that the act is unconstitutional, but he has no legal reasoning as to why it's unconstitutional. This is the Electoral Count Act of 1887, after they had issues with William Henry Harrison's election, and how we lost, and how Reconstruction was defeated, and we got Jim Crow and separate but equal for the next 100 years. And I've talked about William Henry Harrison and his, no, I'm sorry, not William Henry Harrison, forgive me, Rutherford B. Hayes. Rutherford B. Hayes and his election after Ulysses S. Grant left the White House, and how he sat with South Carolina, Louisiana, and another state, and they got into one of smoke-filled rooms, and they did a deal where they said, hey, we won't elect Samuel J. Tilden. We'll elect you if you do a couple of things for the South. You get us a railroad line, because they understood that railroads was the reason why they lost the election, because they had no means of transportation for their beans, band-aids, and bullets. You get rid of the federal troops in the state houses. You get rid of the federal troops, so that way black folk don't have, they're not protected against what the Democrats wanted to do as far as restricting black folk from voting. So when Rutherford B. Hayes, and they call him Rutherford B. Hayes, when he got to the White House, he recalled all the federal troops, and he did everything that the South wanted. And then when you got that, you had another 100 years of separate but equal. You had another 100 years of Jim Crow. So when people talk about 400 years of injustice, they talk about roughly 300 years from 1619 all the way up to like 18 whatever, 200 some odd years, then close to 300 years, and then you talk about another 100 years of Jim Crow. So they add all that together, and you get about 300-400 years. And I will submit to you this: that's roughly 300 years, roughly. Once you get to 2019 made it exactly 400 years. From 1619 to 2019 was 400 years. And where have we progressed? Because, I used to hear about 400. I'm ranting, but I don't want to go off topic here. So what they're saying in the second one is, instead of counting Arizona, put Arizona off to the side. And he's going to do that for the next 7 states. Well, the 7 states that are in contention. I want to say Georgia, Arizona, Pennsylvania, and some other states. All right. At the end of all the counting, right here, at the end, he announces that because the ongoing disputes in 7 states, there are no electors that can be deemed validly appointed to those states. That means that the total number of electors appointed, the language of the 12th Amendment, is 454. So he's saying because those 7 states are disputed, we're not going to use all of the electors. And I can't remember how many total. We're just going to use 454 of the total. This reading of the 12th Amendment has also been advanced by Lawrence Tribe. Just Google Lawrence Tribe. He's a fraud. He's an idiot. A majority of appointed electors. Oh, I'm sorry. That's 454 electors. Because he's saying that 7 states don't count right now, it gets reduced to 228. There are at this point 332 votes for Trump and 222 for Biden. Pence then gavels President Trump as reelected. So that's one way of doing it. He can dismiss those 7 states because they're in dispute. And because they're in dispute, they don't count. And it goes from 454 down to 228. Trump gets 232 and Biden gets 222. He wins by 10 electoral votes. He wins. Now, the Democrats, of course, he says, howls, of course, from the Democrats who now claim, contrary to Tribe's prior opinion, that 270 is required because, of course, to the Constitution, you need all the electors. So Pence says, fine, pursuant to the 12th Amendment, no candidate has achieved the necessary majority. That sends the matter to the House, where the votes shall be taken by states, the representation from each state having 1 vote. Republicans currently hold 26 of the state legislatures. The bare majority needed to win. Trump is reelected. So he can do number 3. He can do number 3. And if Democrats say, hey, what the hell are you doing? That's wrong. He can say, okay, we'll send it back to the House. Because the Constitution says if the electors are disputed, if they don't have the right amount of, the right electors or anything like that, if there's any kind of controversy, and it's happened before. Again, Rutherford B. Hayes, and it happened with the corrupt bargain in 1828 with John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson. It goes to the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives, each state gets 1 vote. It doesn't matter. It's 435 members of Congress, of the House of Representatives. It doesn't matter if there's 435 members and the Democrats are in charge. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They don't go by each individual representative. They go by each individual state. D.C. does not have a vote in the House. They got representation, but no vote. That's why people are upset, because there's taxation without representation in the District of Columbia. Anyway, so each state gets 1 vote because the state legislatures are controlled by Republicans in 26 of the 50 states. He wins by a simple majority. Go back to Andrew Jackson in the corrupt bargain. Who had won? I think Andrew Jackson had won, but he didn't. He won the popular vote, but he didn't have the electoral college count. So Henry Clay, who was in it, it was like 4 people running. It was John Quincy Adams, Henry Clay, Andrew Jackson, and one other guy. This other guy had a heart attack or a stroke, so he dropped out. Henry Clay didn't have enough votes, so of course he had to drop out, but he's the Speaker of the House. Then you had Andrew Jackson and John Quincy Adams. They were 1 and 2, but because they didn't have a majority, it went to the House. Well, Henry Clay and John Quincy Adams, they hated Andrew Jackson. So what they did was conspire, or you would assume that they conspired, because I don't think there was any kind of agreement or anything. But Andrew Jackson said they conspired to get him to lose the election. So what Henry Clay did was he went around to all his people and said, hey, I want you guys to vote for John Quincy Adams. They did that. When John Quincy Adams was voted and he became president, he made Henry Clay his Secretary of State, because Secretary of State was like a stepping stone to the White House. So, of course, they called it a corrupt bargain. 4 years later, they had a rematch. Andrew Jackson won. So, here we go. One last piece. Assuming the Electoral Count Act process is followed, and upon getting the objection to the Arizona slates, the 2 houses break into their separate chambers, we should not allow the Electoral Count Act constraint on debate to control. That would mean that a prior legislature was determining the rules of the present one, a constitutional no-no. The Electoral Count Act of 1887, they're saying that, okay, this past Congress is talking about what this Congress should do. Well, if he's saying that's a constitutional no-no, we're going by the Constitution from a past freaking Congress. So anyway, someone, now look who he says, Ted Raphael Cruz or Rand Paul, etc. One of those radical Republicans who want Trump to win should demand normal rules, which includes the filibuster that creates a stalemate that will give the state electors more time. So this is a way of stalling. So if they don't win it by 3 and they change it to 4 and they don't win it, here's another way of winning it. And number 6. The main thing here is that Pence do this without asking for permission either from a vote of the joint session or from the court. Let the other side challenge this action in court, where Tribe, who in 2001 conceded the president of the Senate might be in charge of counting the votes, and others would press a lawsuit, would have their past position that these are non-justiciable political questions thrown back to them to get the lawsuit dismissed. The fact is that the Constitution assigns this power to the vice president as the ultimate arbiter. We should take all of our actions with that in mind. See, so he says that this wasn't legit. It wasn't viable, but then there's a video of him bragging about the fact that it was. So John Eastman he's going to be subpoenaed. I think he's going to testify in Congress and get this whole thing. This is crazy. I think there's also this They met at a hotel January 5th. Some Republicans and the book, I can't remember the name of the book, but the latest book that came out about the January 6th riots and what happened in the White House around this time, they met at a hotel. The Trump administration, some people with I can't find the word I'm looking for, but some Republicans, some outside federal office Republicans, some White House Republicans, they met at a hotel to strategize January 5th, not about the riot. I don't think they strategized about January 6th riot, but they did strategize about how the federal government can stop Joe Biden from becoming president. So, and the state legislatures approved what happened in their states. And then the state legislatures can't go back and say, oh, we were wrong, because that kills their credibility. So it's crazy. The Republican Party has lost their mind. Donald Trump is still, and I can show you a video of a guy, can't remember his name, predicting what Trump would do. And he's doing it. So that's it, man. I'm gonna leave it at that. I can hear my kids waking up now, so I'm gonna get up out of here. It's time for them to get up and go to school. So look, let me get up out of here, people. You guys have a great Wednesday. I will see you on the next one. And until I do, hey, like, share, subscribe, get this video out, get this message out. If you stayed the whole 21 minutes, I appreciate it. That means you want to learn something. You're interested in what I got to say, and I appreciate it. But get it out there, people. Let everybody know what's going on over here. All right? I will see you guys on the next one. I'm out. Y'all take care.